Hello out there. Welcome everybody to another live stream here from AutoCrit. I do have a little bit of a storm going outside the studio. Hopefully the internet holds up and everything is a-okay. I'm so excited to join you for an update today for the Short Story Challenge 2024. And of course, I asked everybody before I came on, how are you doing? How is your story going? So we have 2,200 words, looking for an ending. All right. Up to a little over 1,100 words, going well. 2,000 words, a little more than halfway done. 3,819 words, and you're finished. Just needs revision and revision. But that's what AutoCrit is for. Exactly. Exactly. Get into the writer's desk and start polishing that up for sure. You hope you can comprehend this better so you can write a more entertaining story. Well, that's what we're here for. And of course, we're going to be doing these live streams. I'm going to have some tips today. And of course, you're welcome to join us in the community as well and ask questions and whatnot. 4,100 words in your draft needs to start editing. All right. All right. Not a single idea yet. Well, hopefully by the end of this stream, you might have some ideas because I'm going to give you, again, some tips and tricks in just a bit. But just to recap what we talked about last week, it is, of course, free to sign up. So if you're like, I don't even know what this is, what is this challenge about? Sign up below. It's a free challenge. That's what it is. Sign up to join us for the short story challenge. We're giving you all month to write a short story. It can be about almost any topic. There's a few guidelines, which I'm about to go through in a moment, but anybody is eligible. So come on in. And by signing up, you are going to be instantly eligible for some prizes. So you don't have to even win the old challenge in order to get some fun prizes. Now, what is like the grand prize? What are we ultimately pulling for, hoping we win? It is the inclusion in our trophy anthology. Now, we call it a trophy anthology because we're not officially publishing it. We're not going to sell it on the market. It's not going to have an ISBN number, but it is an acknowledgement from all of us here at AutoCrit that you did an excellent job, that you're worthy to be in print. And then we print up some copies and we send them to all of the winners. Now, from there, we've had people get into that trophy anthology and go on to sell it somewhere else. Because remember, it is not published. And so technically, it's still a new piece, but just a nice wind in your sails, little boost in your writing career. And of course, the bragging rights and the envy of everybody else here. Using your third idea. Well, I did mention that, I believe, last week, where I said, try a bunch of ideas. You don't have to settle on your first, second, or maybe even third idea. Try you still go further, and maybe that's good enough. I'm not trying to tell you uh uh who was that Tangletail. I'm not telling you, Tangletail, you have to start over, but don't feel bad if you are not in the groove at the third idea. Just keep going. Halfway there. Awesome. Well, that's not a bad place to be because ultimately you will have until the end of the month. Now, as part of your free sign up, you will have access to the writer's desk. We do have a free level of access to the writer's desk, and everything that you need for the challenge will be in there. And so you can write up your whole story in there, and you'll be able to submit through there. Really simple, all there. I'm going to show you some other features you can also find in the writer's desk as well. So, what are the rules of the game? They are rules. They're not guidelines. It's not Pirates of the Caribbean. We really do want you to stick to these rules. And the reason why is not because we want you to feel like, we're trying to cramp your style or make you jump through a bunch of hoops. The idea is that we're trying to emulate a official, professional, situation, right? In the real world out there, you generally will have to follow specific guidelines to get published. You're not going to just be able to throw anything out willy nilly. And a lot of these guidelines are used, or rules, excuse me, are used in order to vet quality. And sometimes it's because of logistical concerns. If they say you can only be 3,000 words, that's not our policy, but if you could they say only 3,000 words, you can't go over it because that's going to mess up what they're intending to use your work for. So you do need to stick to these rules. Keep it in mind. This is good practice. It's just best practices for going out there. So we do want your work to be a narrative. All right. Please don't give us a self help book or a bunch of recipes or just random thoughts, poetry that isn't narrative, that's just, you know, describing a bed and has nothing else going on for it. That would be very hard to do for any length of period of time anyway. It's hard to write more than 1,000 words and not get into a narrative of some sort. But just keep in mind, and you might be scratching your head. Trust us, we've gotten all different kinds of entries. So, yes, we're sticking to narrative. Experimental writing forms, though, are acceptable. So, if you do want to write a poem and it's a narrative poem, it's telling a story, that's fine. If it's a bunch of text, that's fine. If it's even a recipe and somehow the recipe goes off on a weird tangent and it starts to tell a story that's a narrative, I could potentially see that working. Might be a little gimmicky, but it could be very interesting. So keep that in mind as well. The challenging thing with experimental writing forms is you run the risk that you are experimenting and you're not going to be at your very best, right? This isn't something you've done a lot of times. This is something that's new. On the other hand, doing something new could put some boost in your step, reinvigorate you, and you could come up with something brilliant. So feel free, have at it. I'm not throttling you. Just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Okay. You may not have more than 5,000 words in your story. Sometimes people ask us, well, I have 5,001. No, no more than 5,000 words. I'm sorry, but we have to draw the line somewhere. And if we start having a little bit of wiggle room, there could be somebody with 4,999 words, right? And they painstakingly got there. They were at 5,020 and they kept looking for words and looking for words and they finally scrape by, right? And then somebody else is just going to waltz in and do 5,005 and be like, please. And then, yeah, no, no, no. We just have to stick to 5,000. All right. So do not allow yourself to be cut early, because one of the first things we're going to do is just look for who even followed the guidelines. Because if you didn't follow the guidelines, well, you're not eligible. So we can easily cut it out. We don't want it to be easy. We would like it to be very hard to deliberate over all of these entries. So don't do that to yourself. It does need to be a minimum of 1,000. Okay. And that's just to keep it from getting too much on the flash fiction level. So more than 1,000, no more than 5,000. I think the minimum is easier to reach. I don't think we're going to get too many people to violate that unless they goof up or something like that. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, Tammy says that she has trouble with short story anthologies and they keep getting rejected. Yeah, it's challenging. It really is. You just got to stay the course. You get a lot of rejections before you get a success. And I'm sure you're aware of that, but that's, it's easier said than done for sure. No illustrations, which means yes, you cannot describe anything. No, no, no. I mean a like photograph or a pictorial illustration that's embedded in your file. Why? We're just going to have to remove it anyway because that's not part of our printing process and that's not really part of the challenge. We're not really doing a challenge which is a holistic art piece which includes clues in the map or who knows what. Like it starts to go down a rabbit hole where it's not going to be fair because not everybody is talented in that way, and we're really looking for the words on the page. That's what we are dedicated to here at AutoCrit. Not that we have anything wrong with illustrated works, but we're here about getting those words on the page and making them effective. So yes, no illustrations. We do have a few creative guidelines, but not too many. I'll just go over them quickly. Any genre is acceptable. So sometimes people wonder about that because they'll watch our programs, they'll see our videos, and they're like, wow, you lean into a lot of like hard genre, like your mystery or sci-fi or fantasy or horror. I don't write like that. I write, just kind of a straight narrative fiction or literary or women's fiction or something like that, I'm not going to be acceptable. No, no, you are. That's fine. We have no issue with that. And it's all about quality. So if you want to write something that doesn't fit into those neat little categories, is maybe a little bit experimental about it, be my guest for sure. It's fun. While I generally don't recommend writing a full length novel that's hard to categorize, I think short story is a looser form, and I think it can make for interesting experiments where you're like, I don't really know what to call that story, but it was certainly very interesting, right? Because it's just a different audience expectation. Also, keep in mind with us, we're not doing this as a genre specific anthology. So we have no expectation. We hope to get a wide variety, but for all we know, all of the quality works will be cozy mystery. I don't know. I don't expect that, but we just don't know. It's going to be based on the quality of the pieces. We do not know how many submissions we're going to get. I wouldn't want to guess on that because we certainly have a lot of people signed up for the challenge. We have a record amount of people signed up for this year's challenge. However, that doesn't mean everyone is going to submit. Of course, we'd love for everybody to be fully invested, get involved. Again, make our life difficult. If such a thing were to happen, we might need a little more time for the judging than we normally do, but that's a great problem that we would love to have, right? But we just don't know. We don't know. A lot of people will get excited and then kind of lose their luster. So don't let that be you. Go ahead, stay the course. Put your behind in the chair and your hands on the keyboard and submit because why not? Right? At the very least, you will have a story you did not have at the beginning of the challenge. And that does, in fact, matter. Writing matters. Just getting words on the page matters. Every last story will be horror with Daniel as the key player. You know what? If that happens, that would be pretty hysterical. Is an adaptation of an older work acceptable as long as it's in the public domain? So remember, we are going to be printing this up. So we do not want fan fiction about intellectual property. So if you want to do like a retelling of the Trojan horse story or something like that, or Pandora's box, or uh the Odyssey, or I don't know. I'm just thinking Greek mythology. But if you want to do something like that, yeah, sure, that's fine. If you're saying an adaptation of your own older work, the purpose of this challenge is that you are writing this for the challenge. We obviously can't look over your shoulder to know if you came up with all of the ideas after the announcement of the challenge, but the intended purpose is to motivate you to write something new. That is what we're trying to do. That is what we love to do as a whole uh, website here and a whole home for authors, is that we want to encourage you to write. I keep saying that because, well, that's what we try to do. Encouragement, right? So please, don't settle for necessarily an old idea if you can avoid it. Try for something new. This is your opportunity. Are there a maximum number of stories published? Yes, it will be based on the word count. So we do give you that wiggle room between 1,000 and 5,000. And when we actually print it, we want it to feel nice and nice in the hand, like a legit thing. So generally, we go to about 10 stories, but we might do more or less depending on the word count of the ones that we feel reach the quality level that we're looking for. A modernization of a fairy tale, yeah, that's fine. Mhm. Most stories, honestly, are a retelling of some sort. Most of our ideas are not wholly original. So leaning into a little bit more of where you're getting that inspiration, that's fine, and that could be a lot of fun. Retelling of Sleeping Beauty or Cinderella or something. You get your own unique little spin. Somebody was asking, when will we know your decisions have been made? Once we receive all of the entries, we'll be able to give you a better estimate as to how long that's going to be. We want to be serious about this. All right. So, this is something I can tell you I don't have personal experience all over the place. But I do know that there are some contests that are ran that, they'll tell the good piece of advice is submit early, because once they find as many people as they like, they just don't bother reading everybody else. That's not the kind of challenge we want to do. We want to give everybody a fair shake, even people that are submitting towards the end. The deadline is the deadline, right? But just because you happen to be editing at the 11th hour, I don't recommend this, but just because you happen to be editing at the 11th hour, if you're of high quality, we want you to be included. But that means we do literally have to go through every single submission. So because of that, I can't tell you how long that's going to be until I know how many there are. I will say typically it takes us about a month, but don't hold me to that. And I know some people are like, okay, that's what he said. No, no, no. I do not know, because I don't know how many we have yet that have submitted. So I will let you know more about that once I have that information. But I do appreciate the question. And obviously, we don't want to just keep you stringing forever and ever without knowing what the result was, of course. Right. Of course. Page count will be determined by, yeah, that feels about right. I mean, the thing is that if you start getting into hard numbers, then we might paint ourselves into a corner. And again, the point of this is to reward the entries that we think are excellent quality. So if we said we're not going to go over 55,000 words, and so therefore we can't have more than uh 11 stories, and we might have 10, or we might have 11 based on the word count. It starts to get a little bit hairy, and we're not trying to handcuff ourselves. Okay. I understand maybe you want more of a regimented, but this is ultimately in the spirit of fun. We do take it seriously, which is one reason why we want to encourage anybody who has that high quality to be part of the trophy anthology, and get that pat on the back, right? But keep in mind, you know, well, I think I clarified. I am the king of keeping you hanging. Yes, to an extent, I do that, but for this, I mean, I will try to be kind and not handle it too much. Will there be an honorable mention category? Yes, we fully intend on doing that for sure. Okay, so some of the rules that we have are no sexual violence. We don't want to read a whole lot of stories about rape or things like that, just a personal preference of us. We are going to print this, so we do not want any sexual activity with minors under the age of 18, as you might understand why, or incest or extreme sexual content. Now, sometimes people are asking, does that mean I can't do anything in the erotic category or anything sexual? No, that's when we say extreme, we're talking about an X-rated sort of thing, NC-17, whatever you're saying, not R-rated. Um, and if you're concerned about the specificity of that rule, you might just want to ask. Just be like, okay, if I included something like this, would you disqualify it, right? Just ask the question. You can always go on the website. There is a little speech bubble in the bottom right, and just ask the question. You can say, we're obviously not going to be able to tell you if it's going to be good enough to get through, right? But we'll be able to tell you if that content is in that category that we would disqualify. Keep in mind, generally, you have to be on the more extreme side. You do want to submit by the end of the month. Do not wait until the literal 11th hour, right? You could, in fact, wait until the 11th hour, because that is 11:59 p.m. Eastern. However, please don't do that, because inevitably we have people that do that, and then they have some sort of technical problem or whatever, and then they don't get through. And again, we are trying to be fair for anybody who's doing the due diligence. If they're doing the due diligence and they're getting their work on time, unfortunately, they deserve to be prioritized over people that did not. And we understand that life happens and things happen, but we just got to be strict on it for the sake of fairness. Okay. So just don't wait until the last minute. Right? Maybe think of it as May 30th and not the 31st. That gives you some wiggle rooms for life and whatever. And also, us being writers, we do tend to procrastinate to the last second. I can tell you in general, Um, I can tell you in general that a lot of people do submit at the last second. Okay. So you might be like, I think that's what I'm going to do. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because that's what a lot of people do. But just be cautious because we do have people that end up getting disqualified because they submit too late. And I don't want that to be you. You spent a lot of time on this. So please do not do that to yourself, to be honest. All right. Somebody's asking, how can you register? Right here, autocrit.com short story writing challenge. That is where you're going to want to go. You do need to tie into the official theme of racing. So we announced that last week. Now, it is a theme, so you don't necessarily have to completely tear your hair out. It doesn't have to be the only thing in the story. You don't have to think about it in the most matter of fact way. It doesn't have to be about a car race. There are so many different ways to interpret the word racing. Generally, you think about it as some individuals involved in some sort of competition or what is a competition? Not necessarily an organized competition, right? Because like nature is competitive, right? Some sort of competition in order to best something else in a time situation. In a chronological situation. Wow, this is like the most pedantic version definition of racing. But I'm just trying to get very abstract, right? So you might ask, somebody trying to defuse a bomb. I feel like that's a race. There's a time limit, right? It's a race against time. Somebody who is trying to beat somebody else to talk to somebody because they're romantically interested in them. That could be a race, right? Uh, Somebody who wants to finish something before somebody else. That could be a race. There's lots of different ways to think about it besides like a pure competition like the Olympics or something like that. It doesn't have to be a sport. But generally, what you're talking about is you are in a time sensitive situation trying to beat something else, right? You're trying to overcome something else, get something accomplished, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have another way of abstracting the word that you can justify, throw it in the mix. And if you have a question, if you're like, I don't know if the subject of my piece is going to fit into the theme of racing, feel free to ask us because we're more than happy to answer that question just so that you don't have to worry about it and you don't have to feel like, oh, I might get disqualified because I'm not themed enough. Don't don't do that to yourself. Again, there's a lot of don't do that to yourself. We're here for you. Again, the whole point of this challenge is for fun and to motivate you. So, uh, you know, please ask questions. Always worth it to ask questions. All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some ways to kick off your story today. But before I do that, I do want to mention that in the autocrit world, we have a lot of great courses and workshops. I host a fair amount of them. In fact, I'm hosting a few about mystery mind, and unmasking mystery. We did just recently have a cozy mystery author do the cozy mystery workshop, and then we're going to have a police investigator talk about error proofing your crime scene. And you can get all of these things as part of our mystery writing package. So if this is in your wheelhouse, or even maybe you don't write mystery specifically, but you're interested in what I like to call information plots, puzzles for the audience to solve, this is a great way to get all of this at about 35% off. So it's a great value. I know some of you in here have joined me for some of these courses already. So shout out to all my alumni there. Whoop whoop. But yeah, it's another round of it, and always a lot of fun. We get so much done in these courses and workshops, and I always learn something, and they're just a lot of fun. Okay, so that being said, let's talk a little bit about short stories, and let's talk about making short stories count. Alumni classes are awesome. Yes, exactly. All right, so what's in a hook? Well, we often talk about how you want to get the reader's attention early and fast and effectively because people make a first impression in just a matter of seconds. Now, a lot of the first impressions are just, I can read further, not necessarily, wow, this is going to be amazing or I hate this. However, you can try to lean more towards the I love this than settle for something that is just good enough. On the other hand, you can twist yourself into a pretzel overdoing that opening line. However, for the purpose of today, I'm going to discuss how to begin opening line, opening paragraph, those first few sentences in order to ease the audience into the story and some different techniques in which to do so. Because for a short story, it's all the more important because you just have a limited amount of space. So where you begin can honestly sink a piece. It could sink a book too, but all the more so a short story. So, character. Please don't wait too long to introduce us to somebody. I understand that sometimes we like to begin with a very beautiful scene, sensory detail, or things like that. But even if you're describing a unique and interesting location or getting into sensory detail about something, it should be from the point of view of somebody. Now, most of the time, because in the modern era, you know, novels have gone this direction. We write from the standpoint of a individual. We don't write from the standpoint of a disembodied god narrator type. However, even if you are writing from a disembodied god narrator type, you can still include character. They can have a voice. They can have a personality. You could think of something like Lemony Snicket or Death in The Book Thief or something like that, right? But the important thing is that as human beings, we relate to individuals. We relate to personality. So if you're just giving us this abstract information about how beautiful a sunset is, it can be very difficult for us to get to attached to it. You could describe the same sunset, but from the perspective of an individual who has a unique reaction to it, and we're going to find it much more interesting. You probably have realized this when you watch like the news and things like that, because immediately they will pin it down to a narrative, talk about an individual experiencing it. Politicians do this with policies. They don't just say we should do X. They start telling you about the impact it could have on an individual or something like that. Again, it's an effective strategy, so consider this. Now, you might already be doing this because you're like, yeah, Daniel, it's obvious. Of course I'm going to begin with somebody. All right, so then the question I have is what do we know about them from the beginning? A lot of times what authors will like to do is start to describe them. But what they look like is generally not very important to the story, right? It could be because maybe that does really matter. Like the fact that they're elderly and worn out is going to matter because they're going to face some obstacles that's going to challenge them, or they're very short, and they're being forced in a situation where their height is a liability, possibly. But a lot of times it doesn't really matter, and so all you're doing is helping me visualize somebody. And visualizing, not necessarily a terrible thing, but again, what do I tend to relate to when it comes to individuals? It's perspective, it's personality, it's their actual like character, deep down inside. So having them do something versus just describe them is the way to go. Now, generally, you want them to be engaged in some activity moving forward, and it's probably something that's not going 100% well. The reason why is not just because we want to add some drama, but because when somebody is interacting with something and it's not going 100% well, we get to know more about them. How many times have you like been with somebody and it well, think of it this way, like a vacation, right? A lot of times on vacation, people are kind of at their best behavior, right? Or at a nice restaurant or something, where the actual environment is making everybody relaxed. They act a certain way, and then all of a sudden there is a problem, and immediately their true colors come out. It's like why people talked about The Amazing Race being a relationship test, right? Because it's straining you, and it's bringing out all of the potential conflicts that you might have as a couple, right? So this is what you could implement and should implement, rather than show the character in a state of bliss or whatever. It's often better to show them interacting in a way where something at least is going wrong. Not necessarily everything. I'm not saying you have to put them at the edge of the Grand Canyon, but something going wrong is helpful because it tells you what are they prioritizing, what motivates them, how do they solve problems. It's just a faster way for us to learn information about the character, and it's more interesting. Most of the time when we discuss things in life, we discuss conflict. We don't discuss how when we went to the grocery store we could find everything super easily and got home without any issues whatsoever, because what would be the purpose of that? We talk about the time when we couldn't find things, or there was traffic, or a tornado hit us, or whatever, right? More and more dramatic things. Now, how dramatic to make this conflict is a little bit up to you. The luxury you have with short story is you can dial it up to an 11 and sustain that for 5,000 words a whole lot easier than if you wanted to do that for 65,000 words, right? So, yeah, it's a little bit, there's a lot more wiggle room in terms of what you can do. And often short stories do jump to the punch, or whatever, straight to the heart of the matter faster. For that reason, they have a limited amount of space and they want to make a punch statement. You can think about it as like a viral video that often takes a little clip from a situation and it gives you the most exciting or profound part, and it will give you enough context that you can understand it. It'll be like, you won't believe what happened when they did this for the first time, right? And it's some dramatic thing. Often they jump right to it because, yeah, you have a limited amount of time. They don't really need the setup. They're just jumping straight to the matter. In late, out early is the term for this, right? You come into the action as late as you can and you leave it as early as you can before it starts to get boring. Now, there are a few different techniques you could have of opening. Like, what do you start with? So, I'm going to give you a few options. None of these are, these will conflict with one another. So, don't be like, wait a minute, these don't match. No, no, no. I'm going to give you a bunch of different options. So, these are different ways you could start your story. And I know some of you said, I don't have a great idea on how to start or what to do. So, maybe this will help jumpstart you a little bit. You can start in the middle of failure. So, often in stories, we are talking about somebody overcoming failure. They are attempting to do something, it's not working out. Then they do it again and it's not working out. And then they do it again and it works, right? Because if they could do it and it would work from the beginning, you would be telling a story without any conflict. It would be, I wanted to do this, I set out to do it, and I did it. That's not usually a story. What the story is, I set out to do this and I had this trouble. Then I set out to do this and I had this trouble. And then I set out to do it and I won. A short story, often you can skip the I set out to do this and start with I already set out to do this and I'm in the middle of trouble. So think about imagine like you do a short story and it's about an Olympian doing a vault routine, right? And it's just being a highly charged, sensory detail, deep dive. I love depth in short stories, depth, not breadth. Like get deep into it. So it's somebody who's doing a vault and they have two chances to land a vault. You could literally start on the second attempt. You don't have to start with the big buildup and then the first attempt goes badly. You could start off with things were not looking very good because I already crapped out on my first vault, right? And immediately I'm thrust into the situation. I'm thrust into failure. Now, on the flip side, let's imagine when we do it on the other way. We could say, I landed my first vault successfully, but I needed two in a row to make it work. Well, you might want to skip past that first vault because it's success. It's not particularly as interesting to talk about. It's not where the stakes are raised. We're going to jump straight to where there's the potential that success will go awry. So, of course, when you start a story and the character has success, what we're assuming is that's not going to last, or there's a big risk that success is going to get taken away from them. Right. And so, unless you lean into that, you do run the risk of it being like, okay, why are you talking about this? It's great to hear that you're super successful, but what's driving me forward? So, you'd want to immediately dive into I'm successful, I'm worried it's not going to happen, or I'm successful, nothing possibly is going to happen, and then things start to unravel. that sort of thing. Usually, if you want to hint to that at the audience, you have a character that's not very self-aware. You could think of just some big examples like Scrooge or Lightning McQueen or something where they think everything is great, and you're like, no, you're miserable, you're in trouble, and then life hands it to them, and they have to fix it later. I'm just looking at some of these examples here. Oh, you didn't understand the in late, out early. What I mean is for the purpose of the action and the conflict. So that like the vault example, right? You could start it off with the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, and then the person finding their room, and then the person warming up, and then the person doing all of the events that get them to the point that landing two vaults is going to get them the gold medal. And then you could do the first vault, or you could skip past all of that, be right in front of the second vault, and say all of that in quick context, right? She had to land this vault to get the gold medal. That tells me all of that other stuff. I understand what the Olympics are. I know that there would be an opening ceremonies. I know they'd have to find the room. They'd have to travel there. I know all of that, right? So coming in that late could work. Now you might find that's overly disorienting. Maybe you're not allowing yourself enough of a warm up and all of those things. That would be up to you. But I'm just saying, think about how late you can enter your story and it still function as the story you want to tell, if that makes sense, right? If you really wanted to tell, and the premise of my exercise was a deep rooted, deep dive, sensory look at the moments of landing a successful vault or maybe failing. I don't know what's going to happen, right? Then that would work well. You might as well just jump right to that moment and let me feel that moment in of itself. Oh, you're welcome, Christine. No worries. Okay. So, a brink of a decision is another place to go. So, the character is now at the cusp of a major decision. This is usually a major moral decision. I could do this or I could do that. Now, you don't necessarily have to start that as the opening sentence, as I could either, I could say yes to his proposal, but it would mean giving up my career or something like that. You could start there. That's quite a hook, right? In a sense, it's like, whoa, we're right in the middle of something. But you could maybe start a few sentences before that or a paragraph or two before that, but quickly get to the point where a character has to make a major decision. So typically in a story, there is a major decision point. It's called the call to adventure, right? And then the character says, well, I don't know if I want to do this. Okay, I guess I'll do that, right? In a short story, you can essentially begin with the call to adventure. That's what I'm getting at. You can get at something has happened that has changed their life to the point where they have to react to it, and you're in the middle of them deciding what the reaction is. This is a great way to just get your story started and off to the races. That's another option. Now, you could just have an unusual event. You could say that's matching my last one. In a sense, yes, because you have to figure out how to react to an unusual event. But it could be that maybe you don't even have the luxury of reacting to the unusual event. Right? Or there's really no decision to be made. It's just happening. So, like, if your house is on fire, I suppose there might be some decisions about what to save, but maybe not. Maybe you don't even have the time. You just have to get out. Right. So you could start with an unusual event. Something is happening to the character and they're immediately having to react to it. This is a more successful way to start stories a lot of time than starting with just typical events. Because again, we don't tend to talk about typical events because they're boring. They don't have much to say. And even if it's going to get interesting later, short stories often don't have the luxury of that kind of word count. You want to get going a little bit quicker. So, an unusual event would be a place to start. A strong visual image. Now, I know you're like, Daniel, you've kept talking about conflict and you've kept talking about character. A visual image, what's going on? You can do all of that with a strong visual image. A strong visual image doesn't have to be devoid of character. Who is describing this, right? We're getting back to that. I was talking about how to incorporate your character. A beautiful sunset can be described by a character that will have a specific reaction that only that character would react to. react in that manner, and that will tell us a lot about that character and immediately get into the book. You could start with an unresolved question. This is a dangerous way to go about it. It starts to feel a little bit like marketing material or a pamphlet for a vacation. Have you ever wanted to go on a cruise? You know, did you realize that you could save $5,000 on your car insurance? Unresolved questions can feel a little bit like that. I didn't know how I was possibly going to get this done. It can be a little bit heavy-handed and dangerous. However, it can be highly effective. So one way that I would say could be more effective is something like, there's something is it starts to get more in the unusual event, but they're investigating something that they don't really know, or more in the decision. They're not sure which decision to make. If it's just a kind of rhetorical question, something was in the air. They weren't sure what it was, but they could just sense it. Obviously that's horrible, but like even something adjacent to that, you start to get into dangerous territory. But I'm not going to discount it as a possibility. It is something that can be done. An internal paradox. So this is where you have an opening sentence that argues with itself. This can be a highly effective way to get the audience's attention. In the midst of the flaming forest, the owl stood still and calm, right? That doesn't necessarily, you wouldn't assume that sort of reaction. So that makes you very intrigued as to why that character is acting in such a manner. Um, the house was the only house that uh, didn't have a lawn, but instead was lined with cactus. Again, you wonder why it is that house is the way it is. Um, or you could say that's not exactly a paradise. It would be a paradox. It'd be like all the houses were the same, besides the house lined with cactus, right? And then you're like, I'm kind of interested. Like, what it does is it gives you a little bit of a conflict, right? Because it's showing something at odds with what's around it, and so it's an immediate way to nudge us into the story and make us interested. So that's just another option. And that gets into a potentially unique setting, which could be described in such a manner. But sometimes it's just a unique setting, a mini golf course themed around the presidents of the United States. I don't know. That's kind of strange and quirky. All right. Perhaps that could be an interesting way of getting started. Again, though, when you're describing this, make sure you do it through the lens of a character's viewpoint as much as you can. A character's secret. Most people wouldn't know this about me, but I love uh, soap operas. I don't know. A revelation about themselves. This can be effective. It could be heavy-handed because it's like a tell, right? It's like just spelling out a piece of information without any context as to why it matters. But it can, of course, be effective. And the last one I want to mention is the hot take. The hot take is where a character has a reaction that is unusual. It's a little bit like the paradox, but it'd be somebody that's like, I always have hated Christmas, or dogs are so annoying, or something like that. Babies are disgusting. Because what it does is it leans really heavily into that main character's viewpoint. And we're like, why do they feel like that? I'm very interested, right? The ocean is disgusting. I hate sand. It gets everywhere. No, I'm kidding. But but yeah, it's an effective way to get somebody's attention. You've probably seen this on like Twitter, people use it, or X. Yeah, who calls it X? X, because yeah, it's a way of getting attention, right? But it can be effective a way to do so. So those are some different ways of hooking the audience. I certainly hope you found this helpful. We have other tools at your disposal if you ever get stuck along the way. I know some of you have been talking about getting a certain distance in your book, and perhaps or a short story, and perhaps getting stuck or something like that. I keep making the wrong window appear, and I will get it right. What is it? Third time's the charm. Where is it? There it is. So here we have the story builder, and the story builder can be a highly effective way of brainstorming ideas. So if I came into here, into the story builder, and I went down to my beat sheet, I actually do have a short story beat sheet at my disposal, which gives me less beats than the typical one and can help organize my thoughts. Now, you can, of course, use this and come up with ideas because you can input uh, who your character is and your story premise and all that, and it'll give you suggestions. You can also just use it just to help organize yourself. But on the other hand, you can also use it to brainstorm things like endings. I could be putting in my opening image there, my call to adventure moment where something's going to happen, obstacles, the disaster, and the resolution. Now, keep in mind when it comes to a short story, some of these may be the same moment, right? Your opening image could in fact be the same as the call to adventure, and the status quo may happen outside of the range of the book or outside of the range of the short story. It's just something that would be talked about or some, in retrospect. So look at the little eyes and get an idea as to what these specific beats are about. And so you can apply it to your short story. But it's another way of getting some recommendations. And this, of course, is available to any AutoCrit Pro user. Now, speaking of AutoCrit Pro users, if you're an AutoCrit Pro member, you can come tonight at 7 p.m. I will be doing a story doctor. So I will be looking over anything that people bring up. So if you want to bring up something you're working on for the short story challenge, I'm happy to look at it. If you want to talk about any other story you're working on or just any sort of writing question, feel free to do so. Tomorrow at the Horror Club at 6 p.m., we have Simon Bestwick with Gareth, and he'll be doing an interview and talking about writing. Those are always a lot of fun. We have so many events here at AutoCrit. We love to talk writing, as you can imagine. That's what I love to do. It's only because of all of you that I can do that. So thank you very much for letting me speak about writing and being involved in the AutoCrit world. Yep, Short Story Lab is going to be continuing tonight. If you have not signed up for the Short Story Lab, it is an additional course. Feel free to do so, though. You missed the first session, you can watch the recording of it. Great exercises in that. And we'll be continuing that tonight. There's 3 more live sessions, so feel free to jump on board and get involved in that. Somebody was asking about a specific judging matrix. We do not reveal that at this time. I think one of the reasons why we don't, well, I shouldn't say I think, in my opinion, I don't always like those sort of things because what might happen is people will actually build a story to something like that. We really want you to just write and not think about it in such a categorical matrix point system sort of manner. I understand that our system is built on looking at your words in comparison to other authors and things like that, and fair enough. But when it comes to, is this good quality or not, there is a point in which if you're worried about trying to reach some sort of score or some sort of metric, I feel it can actually get in the way of your writing process. Yeah, no worries, no worries. So that's just a personal preference, but that's more or less where we've landed on that. All right. That might be my hot take. Yes, I was a little sparkly because of my background. I appreciate that. But anyway, I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for joining us here at AutoCrit. I certainly hope you're enjoying the writing challenge. We love hosting it. We love encouraging all of you to get writing because that's what we're all about. So go ahead and like and subscribe, hit the bell. If you have any friends who want to get involved, remember, it is a free challenge. So feel free to invite whoever you know, and they can get involved in the writing challenge as well. Thank you so much, everybody. You have a wonderful day. Bye.